Okay, I'm going to have Shabbos, Rabbi Sai. We're continuing in Pirkei Avos with the commentary of Rabbeinu Yona, Perek Gimel, Mishna Beis. Rabbi Chanina Sagan HaKohanim Omer. Rabbi Chanina, the assistant Kohen, would say, Have a mispalo b'shloima shel malchus. Pray for the welfare, for the peace of the government. Shel malei moira, if not for fear of government, ish esrayeu chayim b'lai. One man would swallow his friend alive. Let's see Rabbeinu Yona. Rabbeinu Yona says, Rabbi Chanina Sagan HaKohanim Omer, Have a mispalo b'shloima shel malchus. Shel malei moira, if not for the fear of the malchus, shehi kasha aleinu, which is not easy for us. It's difficult for us. Sometimes it's overbearing. Ish esrayeu chayim b'lai. What does this mean? One should pray for the peace of the whole world. And be distressed over the distress of others. That is the way of the righteous. I, when they were ill, when my enemy was ill, I donned sackcloth. Inisi batsaim nafshi. I afflicted my soul in fasting. She'ein la'adam lasos tachanunav ubakashasai. One should not make their supplication and request litzrachav levad, for their own needs. Ach lehispalel al kol bnei adam. To pray for all of mankind, sheyamdu b'shalom, that they should stand in peace. Uv'shloima shel malchus yesh shalom la'olam. And when the government is strong and peaceful, there's peace in the world. Now, it's clear that we're not talking about necessarily a righteous government, because Rabbeinu Yona clearly says we're talking about it's kasha aleinu, even if it's, so to speak, a wicked regime, but that's the regime in place. And even though it's overbearing, we have to pray for their stability, because instability is anarchy and chaos. And that means we have to pray for the whole world. So let's say, putting it into contemporary terms, should one pray for the welfare of our enemies? Should one be distressed over the downfall of our enemies? That's a very complex question. And the answer is yes and no. The answer is, if you have an enemy and there's no alternative, you need to defeat the enemy, because someone who is merciful to the cruel will end up being cruel to the merciful. And you got to protect your own skin. Should one feel bad that human beings suffer because of their wickedness? Yes, one should have a tinge of sorrow. One can never lose a feeling of humanity. So even when your enemy is destroyed, you rejoice in victory, and there should be a tinge of sorrow that human beings, even if they're wicked, suffer. How do you do both of those at the same time? That is the greatness of man. Man is able to have that dichotomy. The overwhelming majority, you feel of victory is joy, and yet at the same time, one never loses sight of human suffering. And therefore one has to be mispalel for the shalom of the whole world, but not get carried away, because an enemy is an enemy, and you always have to protect your own people. The Mishnah continues that Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion says, Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion Omer, Shnayim sheyoshvim ve'em b'neim divrei Torah. You have two people who are sitting, and they're not speaking divrei Torah. They're sitting at a wedding. What are they talking about? Are they talking about the price of tuna fish in seasons or wall bounds? No, it's a waste of time. It's a moishav leitzim. Shenemar uva moishav leitzim lo yashav. In the sitting of the scoffers, do not sit. Avos shnayim sheyoshvin v'yesh b'neim divrei Torah. Two people are sitting, and there is Torah among them. Shechina b'neim, the Shechina is among them. Shenemar Az nidbaru yirei Hashem ishal re'eu. Then those who fear God spoke one man to their friend. Vayakshev Hashem Yishma. God was attentive and he listened. Vayikasev Sefer Zikaron Lefanav. He wrote in the book of remembrance before him. Liyirei Hashem. To those who fear Hashem. Ulechoshvei Shemai. So when two people are together and they speak divrei Torah, God is among them. Ein li ela shnayim. I only know two. Minayin shafilo echad sheyoshev oisav gita. How do I know even one guy who sits and learns Torah? Shakadosh Baruch Hu koivei alo ischar. God establishes a reward. Shenemar yeshev badad v'yidoim kinatal alav. If one sits alone and contemplates Torah, he will receive his reward. It says Rabbeinu Yona. Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion Omer, Shnayim shel yoshveim b'neim divrei Torah is a Moshe Leitzim shenemar, with a Moshe Leitzim la yashav. Shnei inyanim nikra'u leitzanas. There are two things called leitzanas. What does leitzanas mean? Leitzanas doesn't mean, why did the chicken cross the road? Leitzanas is two things. Ha'echad lashon hara, ha'medaber ra al chaveroi, one who speaks bad about his friend, la'achlimai, to shame him, and to establish your friend as lowly in their eyes. Leitzanos, in the sense of lashon hara, is one of the great sins. That a person sins and is guilty. This midah is just plain evil activity to put people down. That's the first type of leitzanos. Rabbeinu Yona continues on the bottom. V'alav amar Shlomo b'chachmasai, about such a let's, Shlomo says in his wisdom, Yahir, a arrogant, let's shemai, scoffer is his name, oiseh be'evras zadain, acts in the fury of his anger, of his intentional evil. Ratzolaim shtei midos elu harois. There are two bad midos here, zadain v'yahir. Intention and arrogance. Shteihen nichlalu b'leitz. They're both included in let's. V'zed, so a let's incorporates intentional wrongdoing and arrogance. V'zed hu hamadaber al chaberoi. A intentional person, a wanton person, is someone who speaks on his friend. U'mevaza oisai b'fnei oilam. He shames him in front of others. V'yahir hu, the arrogant one, who b'machshava, is in thought. She'ein adam nechshav lefanav l'klam. Nobody has value in his eyes. V'hamuchtar b'shnei dvarim halalu, one who is crowned with these two bad traits, namely a zayd and yahir, one who acts intentionally to hurt his friend, and one who's arrogant, he's called a letz. And maybe you'll say, okay, maybe at worst he'll speak badly about his friend, but he won't do anything wrong. No, he'll act as well. Maybe you'll say, okay, he doesn't guard his tongue. His hands are tied. He won't sin with his hands. About this it says, he acts with the intention of his wanton attitude. This matter, that his name is Let's Kashayavo El Hamasa, when he comes to act, Bekas uvachzorius asena, he will do so with anger and cruelty. Meaning, if someone has this dynamic duo, namely, to speak bad about others, and number two, arrogance, this person will come to act and to hurt other people. Says Rabbeinu Yona, ki aleitzanatz moira alav shehu roya ma'alolam bli safek. His scoffing reflects that he's a man of bad action. Ushloima el vashalom hayem menachem l'shoimim cherpas haleitzonos ve'enam mashiven. Shlomo would console those who hear the shame of scoffers and don't respond. Va'amar im l'leitzim hu yalitz v'la'anovim yitenchem. Let's explain, what does it mean? Im l'leitzim hu yalitz v'la'anovim yitenchem ratzalaymar hamisloitzitzim mimcha. Those who scoff at you, ha'elokim yisloitzitz mehem. God will scoff at them. V'yoyser yafsidu b'leitzanos mimcha shemea. They who scoff at you will lose a lot more than you who had to listen to your disgrace. Im la'leitzim, to those who scoff, hu yalitz, God will scoff at them. Ule'inyan hashoiskin oisam be'ena meshivin, to those who are silent and don't respond, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yitein lahem chen, God will give them grace. And then the pasuk says, Aval HaKasav Omer, the pasuk says, V'moishav leitzim la yashav. In the sitting of the scoffers, he didn't sit. Loi diber min haleitzanim she'amarnu. This is not talking about the type of scoffing that we mentioned, but rather, this is a new kind of scoffing. So the first type of leitzanos we discussed was those who mock other people, to which Rabbeinu Yona says God will mock at them. You should know, if they have that attitude to speak bad about others and to be arrogant, then they will ultimately act. But we'll see next week, there's a second dimension of leitzanos, which is not scoffing at people, but rather people who just chatter. That's another kind of leitzanos. We'll discuss that, Be'ez Hashem, next week. We're going to hold it over here for this week. I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos. Bracha v'atzlacha. Kol tov. Good Shabbos. Kol tov, everyone. Have a good Shabbos.
Recording stopped.
Kol tov.